My name's Tim Loudon. I am the program manager for the digital analytics program, and we are very excited today to have our second in this case study, second of 3 parts. This one focusing on reporting and analysis, being led by my colleague and fantastic analyst, Freddie Blicker, and with the partnership of the digital.gov team, which is also based here at GSA. I'll just make a mention now, and I'm sure Freddie will touch on it as well, but if you haven't seen part 1, it's up on our YouTube channel. I can pop that in the chat as soon as I'm done speaking. A couple things to go over before we get started. So this will be a 1-hour webinar. We have a lot of content to get through, so hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. Please put them into the chat box as you have them. I can answer some along the way, or we'll save them till the end if it seems pertinent. Also, we'll be sending out a survey, which I think will also be put in the chat box towards the end of the webinar and sent out to you afterward via email. Please take the 2 minutes it takes to fill out the survey. Let us know what you thought of this and how we can improve it. We're always looking to try to make things better. So with that, since there's a ton of content, I will pass it on to Freddie so that you all can hear about the implementation of the reporting.
Great, thank you, Tim. Appreciate that intro. Hi, everyone. My name is Freddie Blicker. I'm an analyst supporting the DApp program. I'm excited to be here with you today. As Tim mentioned, we do have a lot of material to get to. Now, I'm going to be jumping around quite a bit into Google Analytics from a DApp perspective, a free Google Analytics account, and also into Google Tag Manager to tell you the story of our engagement with the digital.gov team. So today's case study is looking at the reporting and analysis portion of this 3-part webinar series. So let's dive in. So really quick overview. This is the second webinar in a 3-part series. If you didn't attend or view the replay of part 1, this may be a little confusing. So we highly recommend you go back, review the previous part 1 if you haven't been there yet. Now, quick overview, digital.gov is a website that exists in TTS at the GSA. They're a sister program of DApp. What you see on the screen here is the website that we have been working with the digital.gov team on how to come up with a web analytics strategy and reporting framework. Okay, so I want to quickly say a big thank you to the whole digital.gov team. Partnering with the digital.gov team has been a real pleasure in this 3-part webinar series. So just want to say thank you again to Sarah Cope, Tony Benito, Rhett Skelton, and Alex Schulte. Really appreciate your partnership and working with us and collaborating. It's been a great pleasure to work with everyone. So just really briefly, want to do a quick recap before we get into the meat of today's presentation. So in part 1, we presented on assessment. So in assessment, we looked at what is the analytics strategy that digital.gov needs to use. We went over a brief overview of our methodology. We talked about things like website mission, goals, KPIs. We defined 5 specific goals that measure success, right? Goals are the things that you need to be thinking about in terms of how you measure your website's performance. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to be talking about the reporting that's going to get you to the analysis. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the difference between DApp Google Analytics and free Google Analytics. More than likely, you have both on your site. We're going to walk through step by step how to use DApp Google Analytics and a free Google Analytics account to pull reporting to answer questions about 3 different goals that we established for digital.gov. So we're also going to talk about how we configured different things to be tracked in Google Tag Manager, and then how we actually created the goals and what that looks like in reporting. So the goal of today's webinar is to illustrate the thought process with how to think about your website at home, and also how you're going to need to configure your free Google Analytics account or calculate your goal conversion rates using DApp. You're probably going to be doing a little bit of both. Okay, so let's talk about DApp versus the free Google Analytics account. There's some differences between the 2 approaches. So for DApp Google Analytics, this is the program out of the GSA. DApp has features pre-configured. So you can think about it this way. If you implement using our best practices from the GitHub repo, you can essentially set it and forget it. DApp provides configuration assistance with filters, custom dimensions, QA, and it's supported and managed by the GSA, and it tracks things like engagement with YouTube videos, outbound link clicks, events for file downloads, special custom dimensions. So this means there's no extra work for you. You simply configure the script based on what you want to track. Now, the one difference here when we're talking about goals is that the DApp interface does not support goals. In Google Analytics, you are limited to 25 goals per view. Now, I'm sure everyone here who uses DApp realizes when you go into your agency view, there are hundreds of websites typically within a view. And because of that, we can't equitably distribute goals to all sites. So for that reason, we ask that folks can create their conversion rate metrics and calculations manually. Now, oftentimes, many agencies will choose to use an independently managed Google Analytics account, which is free in parallel with DApp. Now, with this approach, you own the configuration of your free account. So you need to configure all aspects. It's managed by your team. It does not automatically track engagement with YouTube videos, outbound link clicks, etc. You'll likely need to configure a tag management software like Google Tag Manager. Now, the benefit of going with a free Google Analytics account is it does let you create goals because it's only your site in that specific Google Analytics account. You have the option of setting up to 25 goals. Now, many agencies use both the free version of Google Analytics and DApp Google Analytics. And in fact, we recommend this. This is a very useful combination of tools to really analyze and understand engagement on your website. So the benefit of using both is that you're going to be able to compare data sets to make sure your data is more congruent. You'll be able to look at DApp to better understand baselines. You can use your account to understand goal performance built into the interface. There's a lot of really useful ways of leveraging both tools to realize that value. Now, really quickly, you might recall from part one, we talked about digital analytics being the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of internet data for the purposes of understanding and optimizing web usage. So in part one, we talked about measurement. In part two today, we're talking about collection and reporting. So let's talk very briefly about those. Collection. This is how your analytics tool is implemented to collect the data about your site performance. So this involves things like how you track your data via Google Analytics or DApp Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager. And when you're thinking about collection, you need to be thinking about, okay, what's my website CMS? Google Analytics knows nothing about my site, so it needs to be completely customized to your site, right? You need to know what your marketing strategy is, your content strategy, and so forth. You need to know what your goals are and what your KPIs are to be able to understand how successful your site is at getting your users to do the thing that you want them to do. And you need to configure goals in your free Google Analytics account, if you have one, to represent that conversion rate for those specific goals. Reporting. This is how your team identifies and pulls the relevant data from the interface of Google Analytics. So using your website mission, goals, and KPIs as your compass, so to speak, to navigate through the tool, to figure out how to pull your data, this is reporting. Quick reminder, you always need to know and think about your website mission, goals, and KPIs. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we already talked about this at length in part one. Listing these here for you. You'll get the deck after today's presentation. So really quickly, these are the goals summarized from part one of our webinar. We had 5 goals. And let's very high level briefly talk about what is a goal. So think about it this way. A goal is, what do you want your users to do on your site? Is that download a PDF, submit a form, reach a specific page, submit an application? These are all things that can be tracked with Google Analytics so that you can calculate goal performance manually in DApp and or configure your goals in a free Google Analytics account. So that's how we're going to be looking at this today from the perspective of what's possible in DApp and what's possible in digital.gov's free Google Analytics account. So let's look at the 3 goals that we're going to be investigating today. Goal number 3, increasing communities of practice registrations by a certain percentage month over month. So communities of practice registrations. Goal number 4, increase average session duration on DigitalGov by X% month over month. Goal number 5, increase event registrations by X% month over month. We're going to be looking at a very limited initial data set for these 3 goals to see what this data actually looks like in a free Google Analytics account and compare that with a manually calculated goal from DApp so that you get an understanding of both worlds. Now, let's talk a little bit about a free Google Analytics account. Now, remember I mentioned this is something that you have to own on your team and you have to completely figure out what to track, how to track it, why you want to track it. So this slide here represents the life cycle of the DApp team's engagement with digital.gov. So here's how we approached assessing digital.gov's free Google Analytics account. So in red, the first thing we did was assess what are digital.gov's goals. How are they configured or not configured in their Google Analytics, their free account, and what does their Google Tag Manager look like? Next, after identifying which goals didn't exist, we then used Google Tag Manager to inject a test GTM container on the site and start developing the tags, triggers, and variables to actually track the things that are important for digital.gov's goals. The next aspect of this in green is we tested and QA'd the features and functionalities that we built into Google Tag Manager. From there, we engaged with our customer and showed them our findings and what we configured in our development environment, got the okay from them to push the changes live to production, and then we recreated those tags, triggers, and variables in Google Tag Manager in production, pushed it live, and started collecting data. The data started flowing into goals, and now we have goal reporting in their free Google Analytics account. So we're going to be illustrating to you today what that looks like. So let's start with goal number 3. Now, goal number 3 was increasing the communities of practice registrations by a certain percentage. We don't need to know that right now, month over month. This is just simply the goal. Now, the KPI that we're looking at, that we defined in part 1, was looking at the number of join by email button clicks and email address clicks on each community of practice specific page divided by the total number of sessions entering digital.gov. So if we can configure how to track this in their free account, and we have this data in DApp already as well, we can start to figure out the conversion rate using this KPI. So let's dive into this. So how did we approach thinking about this goal and figuring out what do we currently track and what do we need to track? Well, in DApp, we know we have event reporting out of the box for mail to link clicks. In the free Google Analytics account for digital.gov, we realized we needed to track mail to link clicks. These weren't configured. Let's look at the site in real time to talk about this. So I'm on digital.gov. I'm going to go to the communities of practice. I'm going to click into the A/B testing community of practice. Now, from part 1, we identified that the digital.gov team cares about folks who are clicking this join by email button or this email address in the body copy of the content. And so when you click on this, we need to figure out, okay, that's the thing we want to track. That represents an action that we need and want to track, okay? Now, these are email addresses. These are both email addresses. So this is what we're trying to figure out. How do we track this thing? Is this data available in DApp? And is it available in our free account? So this is the thought process you need to be taking back to your work after today's webinar. This is how you think about it. Okay, so let's talk about this from the perspective and illustrate this in DApp. Now, on the screen here, you'll see the Automagic top event reporting where we're capturing out of the box these email addresses for the COPs, for the communities of practice. and under event action, and we can see these are being captured on all the different communities of practice here, and we see the number of events. So let me illustrate what that looks like. So I'm in the government-wide account, I'm in the GSA agency profile, and within GSA, I find the data for digital.gov. Now, you see here, outbound mail to, I've already filtered this for outbound mail to. This is how any email address is captured with DApp out of the box. Gets captured as an event. So we see here, event category, outbound mail to. Now, what we see here are the different, let me go back a little bit here. And let me go add a secondary dimension. Go back to the deck here. I'm going to be jumping back and forth here. Actually, I'm going to pull in page. One second. So just be forewarned, we're going to be doing a lot of jumping around here. All right, so I'm going to pull in a page as a secondary dimension. Okay, I'm going to filter for outbound mail. Okay, and then just to make sure, I'm going to choose page. And I'm going to choose communities. This URL here. And let's see what pops up here. Okay. So out of the box, we see here we've got outbound mail to and we've got page. So we can see that email addresses are being clicked here. Now, if we do a similar type of logic, let's look at event action and identify the specific communities of practice that people are clicking on. So we see here A/B testing community. Now we're going to identify that this specific email addresses are being captured in the reporting. Okay, so let me go over here. And let me illustrate how we're getting here. So I'm going to go to secondary dimension. Pull on a page. Let me get out of here real quick. Okay. Now, obviously, to understand what's happening here, you need to understand events. So that's an important concept. If you're brand new to Google Analytics, this is going to be challenging. I'm going to pull an event action and filter for the @ symbol for these email addresses. Just zoomed in there a little bit for you. And now we can see all the different communities of practice, the email addresses specifically like A/B test, right? This is the A/B testing community. So this is the data that we have out of the box in DApp. So what does this mean? Well, we can right now calculate the conversion rate. So remember the KPI that we're looking at is the number of events for mail to email address link clicks divided by the total number of sessions entering digital.gov. And that conversion rate is 1.07% for the last 2 weeks. Now, you may be asking, how do I get the sessions? So if you're familiar with content reporting, you can go over to behavior, site content, landing pages. And then you can do an advanced filter and then type in digital.gov to filter through all the sites in the GSA agency profile. And here are the sessions. And so this is how we were able to calculate 1.07%. So what this means is 134 divided by 12,498 equals 1.07% conversion rate. So this tells you the percentage share of all traffic entering digital.gov that did the thing that they want to happen, which is join a community of practice. And so now you can report out of DApp today, 1.07% of all traffic converted. This is how you need to report. You should not be using page views. You should be using conversion rates. Okay. Now, let's talk about the free Google Analytics account. Now, remember we mentioned that there are no events set up for mail to link clicks in the free account. Remember, we have to manage that all ourselves. Digital.gov uses Google Tag Manager. Digital.gov wanted goals configured in their free account to track performance. So the required next step for us as analysts is to figure out a way to set up events for mail to link clicks in Google Tag Manager. That's a lot. So let's do a little demo in Google Tag Manager for how I came up with a solution to track mail to link clicks on this page with a free account. So here on the screen is Google Tag Manager. Now I created an event tag called Join COP. Now let's look at this. Now, this is a more advanced topic. I don't expect you to know how to do this after today's session, but just know this is the process for how you need to think about what you need to track in your own free account so that you're able to configure goals. The purpose here is to set up these goals so that you can start reporting out of your free account, or you can manually configure them in the DApp account. It's up to you, but we know that many agencies have both accounts, and so that's why we're showing you both approaches. Now, in this specific tag, I've set up a Google Analytics Universal Analytics tag with an event track type, and I've entered in here event category, action, and label values. So it's always gonna say join COP in my Google Analytics reporting. It's going to show the click URL and then the page URL. And then I've connected this here with the digital.gov GA settings. This is the UAIDs. This is telling Google Analytics, this is basically sending this event data to Google Analytics. And then I've set up a separate trigger here that basically says click just links. And I've selected some links, and then click URL starts with mail to. So now what this is going to do, this is going to, on this specific page, I'll show you what it looks like. I'm going to go into preview mode in Google Tag Manager to illustrate what this looks like on the live site. Okay, so once this reloads, I'm now in preview mode with Google Tag Manager. Now I'm looking at the A/B testing community. I'm going to refresh this, and hopefully you're able to see my Google Tag Manager testing tool here. I'm moving it with my cursor. In case you it's at the very bottom of my screen. So you want to look there. Now, watch what happens when I click join by email. Let's look at this. See here, link click. My join COP tag fired. And let's look at the values here. So when that join COP tag fired, it sent the value of category, join COP, and then the action, click URL, and then the label, page URL. So it's going to do this automatically for all mail to links on digital.gov. That could be over, let's look at AI. Same concept. I'm going to click join by email. The link click fires, and then we see here the actual values. You see here, join COP. Action, click URL, label, page URL. So what does that look like? Well, the result in digital.gov's free GA account looks like this. So we've got event category of join COP. We have event action of these different email addresses, and then we have the events. So let me show you what that looks like really quickly, how you actually find that data. So I'm in the free account. You go to top events, and then I'm going to go to all events. Here we go, join COP. This is what I have programmed in to Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager is set, basically saying with the Google Analytics JavaScript snippet, fire these event values of category, action, and label. So I'm in the category, here's the action, and then here's the label. We can pinpoint exactly where people are clicking on these mail to links. So we've defined how we did this in Google Tag Manager. We've shown you what we did in the data. So what's the next step? We have these events. Well, we need to set up our goal. In Google Analytics, you can set up what's called an event goal. You can use category, action, and label to define a success engagement, a goal. Now you'll notice here, category equals to join COP, exactly what we told Google Tag Manager to send to Google Analytics. And then I have a label here for a regular expression pulling in anything with communities in the URL. Let's look at what that looks like. I'm gonna go to the admin screen in the free account. I'm gonna look at goals. And then I'm gonna see, let's see here, join COP. And now I know what I've configured for my event tracking. I'm able to put in join COP, I'm able to put in communities, choose a regular expression, save this goal, and then I can view the goal reporting. That's super exciting, right? So let's look at goal reporting. So I'm gonna go to the conversion reports. You're not gonna have any reports here in your free account unless you have your goals configured. So you're always gonna go to conversions, goals, overview, and let's look at what this looks like. So we have join COP selected here. You can have all your goals. You can toggle it here very easily. And we're only looking at a very small data set. So you need to take such small data sets with a grain of salt, just so you need to monitor your goals over time. And what we see here, we see 0.48% conversion rate. So now the digital.gov team can go in and basically say, you know, for the previous quarter, you know, we're converting at X%, and then over time, they can start reporting month over month, week over week, and they will always have this success metric defined in the free account to make their lives easier in terms of pulling reporting. Now, this is not required. DApp, you're able to do all this in DApp, manually calculating these data sets in a spreadsheet, as I illustrated before. But we do know a number of folks out there do use the free accounts. We're trying to illustrate how you need to use the free accounts, okay? You need to configure your goals. Okay, so that's goal number 3. Let's jump into goal number 4. We have 30 minutes left. I want to make sure to get through all this material so that we can hopefully answer a few questions. We do realize that this is dense, this is tough stuff, but this is where you need to orient your analysis and your frame of mind in terms of how you think about your website. Follow this as a guide at home after today's webinar, okay? Now let's talk through goal number 4. Goal number 4 is simply increasing the average session duration across the whole site on digital.gov by a certain percentage month over month by leveraging new content, marketing, and events. So the KPI that digital.gov decided on was looking at the percentage increase or decrease of the average session duration. Now let's talk about average session duration. So how does Google Analytics calculate this? Well, Google Analytics simply adds together the duration of each session in seconds and then divides that by the total number of sessions. Now, I'm sure many folks on today's presentation have used average session duration. Let's dive into this a little bit more to help you better understand this concept. Now, how did we approach figuring out this goal? Well, in DApp and the free version of Google Analytics, we have out of the box the average session duration metric in the landing pages report. So all you need to do in DApp is filter for your specific domain in this report. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so we're already filtering for digital.gov. And you'll see here we have landing page and we only see digital.gov sites, pages. Now you're gonna just navigate over here and you're gonna see average session duration is an out-of-the-box metric that is included in this report. 1 minute, 24 seconds. That's the average for this particular time frame. We're only looking at 2 weeks worth of data, okay? So This is how we need to report. We need to understand, are people browsing content in their session more effectively or less effectively, right? The longer somebody stays on your site, the better. So let's also look at this in terms of the digital.gov free account. So I'm just going to show you here really quickly. It's the exact same concept. You go to landing pages, and then out of the box, you have average session duration. See here, average session duration. Okay. So how do we figure out this goal? Well, you need to look at the baseline of average session duration. And to do that, you need to look at the average for the last year. And so I calculated that to be 1 minute and 2 seconds. That's going to be our threshold, our baseline. Okay. So we've already illustrated this in DApp. This average session duration. Now, this is great because we don't need to do anything with Google Tag Manager to get this metric. It's already built in. So we can jump to setting up the goal. So let's do that now. Now on the screen, you'll see here, I've chosen an average session duration goal. And I've defined the duration for success for this goal as anything greater than 1 minute and 2 seconds, because that's the average for the last year that I looked at for sessions. So let me show you what that looks like in the free account. So let me go over here to admin. I'm going to go to goals again. And I have this average session duration goal set up. Okay. So now you're going to have to configure this manually. And you see here, there's 4 different types of goals. We've got a destination URL page. We have a duration page, right? We have pages or screens per session. We have an event goal. You need to figure out how to track the engagement point with Google Analytics so that you can figure out how to set up your goals. This is how you connect the dots between setting up goals to measure your success and what you need to track using Google Tag Manager in your free account. We do a lot of this work already in DApp. We just can't set up goals like we're doing in this illustration in the free account. So let's go to how I set this up. So I set up a duration greater than 1 minute and 2 seconds. So that means any sessions that last longer than 1 minute and 2 seconds, digital.gov team gets credit. It proves a point about their content is sticky, it's driving engagement, or their marketing is driving engagement. There's a whole lot of different ways that you can slice and dice this data. So we've set up the goal. This is the main point here. You always want to think about, how do I calculate my goals in DApp, or how do I set up a goal in my free account? Now let's view the goal in reporting. Now you see here, there's a screenshot of what we're about to look at. This is actually in the free Google Analytics interface. So we've got average session duration, and we see we've got a conversion rate of 20%. So let's go look at that reporting in real time for you. I'm going to go to conversions, goals, overview. And then I'm going to choose average session duration. And then you see here we have 3,002 goal completion. So these are 3,002 sessions that lasted longer than 1 minute, 2 seconds. And we see we have a conversion rate of 20% here. Now, this is only 2 weeks of data. So are we expecting a conversion rate of 20% for looking at a quarter or perhaps a month? Probably not. But again, we're just getting these goals set up so that we can monitor, verify, QA, and then modify if anything with the goals needs to be reconfigured or tweaked to better represent reality, okay? Now, goal number 5 is to increase event registrations by X% month over month. Now, the KPI that the digital.gov team decided upon was the number of outbound link event clicks to Eventbrite from any register buttons across the whole site, divided by the total number of sessions entering digital.gov. So this is going to tell them what percentage share of all the sessions, all the traffic entering digital.gov decided to register for an event. think about this. This is a very important concept. You don't want to ever report on page views, but you do want to report on concrete, actual things that your users literally do on your site. And so if your site is designed to send people to register for events, you want to make sure that you're analyzing and assessing and reporting those registrations. And so that's what this goal represents. So let's illustrate this in a live example. So I'm going to go over to events. Now this is the events page. You can also get to events from the home page. There's also register buttons on the home page. Okay. Now, if I click on register, watch what happens here. Click on register, and it sends me to eventbrite.com, where then you can register. So this is the engagement point that we're trying to find out, okay, how does DApp track this? And how do we need to configure our own independently managed free Google Analytics account to track this? This is the thought process. So let's talk about that. So in DApp, we know we have event reporting for outbound link clicks automatically out of the box. That's the beauty of DApp. DApp does a lot of heavy lifting for you, okay? In the free Google Analytics account, we don't have outbound link clicks configured. So then we need to take an extra couple steps and configure those. So how could we use DApp to calculate this goal conversion rate for event registrations on Eventbrite? Well, let's look at this. Let's look at this screenshot first. We've got event action, includes eventbrite.com, and then we see the pages where this is happening, and then we have the events. So let me show you how you at home can go in and access this event reporting. So I'm in the GSA agency profile still. I'm going to go down to behavior, events, top events. Let me go back here and see what I'm pulling here. I'm pulling in an event action of Eventbrite and then the page. Okay, so now we have all these different event categories. Okay, so I can very quickly toggle over to event action and I can search for eventbrite.com. Here we go. We have eventbrite.com, okay? And then I can pull in, for example, a page as a secondary dimension to understand all the pages of the events where people are actually signing up. And so let me filter my pages for digital.gov. Okay. Okay, so here we go. So now we have in DApp, out of the box, total events for eventbrite.com registrations, and we can pinpoint exactly which registrations are driving the most engagement. So this is the power of DApp. It does a lot of this tracking for you out of the box. Now, to assess the performance of our goal, let me go back up here. Increase event registrations by a certain percentage month over month. We can calculate this manually using DApp by pulling these events for Eventbrite as outbound links. So for example, we've got 274 events divided by 12,498 sessions. So we have a conversion rate of 2.19%. So that's how you can calculate it in DApp. Now, let's talk about the free account. Now, obviously, digital.gov wants to use their free account to complement DApp. So now in digital.gov's free account, we already mentioned they don't have events set up for outbound link clicks to Eventbrite. They're using Google Tag Manager. These are all things that we need to be aware of as we're assessing the situation with what we need to track. Digital.gov wants goals configured. So what we need to do as our next step is set up events for outbound link clicks in Google Tag Manager. So let's do a live demo of this to show you what you need to be thinking of. So I'm back in Google Tag Manager. And so I created a tag that listens for any outbound link click. So let me show you what I did to create this. So we see here, I set up a Google Analytics Universal Analytics tag that actually throws an event with a category value of, event category of outbound link click. It pulls in the click URL. So if Eventbrite is in the URL that somebody clicks, that will show up as an actual example, will show up as an actual value in reporting. And then the page URL, this is where that click occurred. I've connected it and I've sent the data back to the Google Analytics property for the free account. And then if you look at my trigger, I set up a click, just linked, some link clicks, and I created an auto event listener that says, is outbound equals true? So what this means is that Google Tag Manager is going to be listening for any link that does not have digital.gov in the actual URL structure. So what that means is that any link that sends traffic to Eventbrite or to, let's say, gsa.gov or performance.gov, anything non-digital.gov, it's going to be captured as an outbound link click auto-magically by using Google Tag Manager. Let me show you what it looks like when we do this using debug mode in Google Tag Manager. So I'm going to open and toggle my little tag testing tool here. I'm going to show you what happens. Let me refresh this page real quick. Okay, it's reloading. Now I've got my GTM testing tool here. Now I'm going to go back here and I'm going to click on register and watch what happens over here under summary. Link click, tags fired, GA event, outbound link click. Let's look at this. So I'm going to expand this. So we've got outbound link click as the event category. We've got the action as the click URL. So whatever was in this link is going to show up in reporting. And obviously that is Eventbrite, right? And then we have the event label of page URL that's also going to show up in reporting in the free account. So let's look at what this actually looks like in the free account reporting. So we're going to see something that says outbound link click under event category. And then we're going to see all the Eventbrite links here and all the number of clicks represented as events. So I'm going to pull up category and action in the free account. Now, for folks who are newer to DApp at home, you are not expected to be able to do all of this. This is tough stuff. What we are showing you here is what you can strive for. We certainly encourage everyone to leverage our webinar materials to get up to speed. We have a YouTube 101 video on DApp. There's a lot to learn about Google Analytics. This is complicated stuff. So I'm going to filter for outbound link. Okay. And I'm going to pull in an event action. And then I'm going to filter event action for Eventbrite. Let's see what shows up. Okay, here we go. So we see here, this matches what I just showed you in our debug tool in Google Tag Manager, outbound link click. And we see the specific registrations. We see the dynamic URLs of all these different Eventbrites automatically appear here in reporting. So we are literally programming Google Analytics, this free account, to capture this data. Okay, so now that we've figured out how we need to track the data that we need to configure the goal, we can now set up the goal. And now we can set up an event goal because we've set up an an event action of eventbrite.com. So let me show you really quickly what that looks like. So I'm going to go back to the admin interface. I'm going to go to goals. I'm going to go to event registrations. And now you'll see here, this is an event goal. I configured these. And I'm pulling in eventbrite.com with a regular expression under event action. So this is how you connect the dots between what is your goal, you track it with Google Tag Manager for a free account, You send that event data back to the tool, to Google Analytics, and then you configure goals that represent the success engagement point so that you're able to then report on that conversion. So let's view the conversion reporting for this particular goal. I'm going to go to conversions, goals, overview. I'm going to choose event registrations. And here we go. We've got 1,507 completions, and we have a 10% conversion rate. Now, interesting to note, you'll notice previously we calculated 2.19% in DApp versus a 10.04% conversion rate in the free account. More than likely, you will run into a situation like this where your conversion rate in your free account may not match. Here's why. Depending on how you configure your goals in your free account, you could see differences between DApp and your free account. Here's why. There will be variations in the data, and obviously we identified that. So we had to re-examine the data for the different events that were firing for Eventbrite. We found out that there were extraneous event actions that included the word Eventbrite that were being calculated in the conversion rate and bumping the conversion rate up to 10%. Now, by virtue of using DApp to analyze and compare and contrast, that helped us realize, oh, there's something happening here with the data in the free account that doesn't entirely make sense to me. So I'm going to go back and investigate what is causing the conversion rate to go up so high to 10%. Now, what I'm trying to illustrate here is a real world example where this is how you're going to have to approach configuring your goals. You're going to have to configure the goal. Then you're going to have to monitor the goal, oftentimes on a daily, weekly basis, until you're able to QA the goal, verify that it's accurate, and then if you find something that's incorrectly bumping up the goal, inflating the conversion rate, you then need to modify the goal to exclude the data that's inflating the goal conversion rate. You always need to do this over a number of weeks. So we are only into this 2 weeks. We have 2 weeks of data that we're looking at. So I am still monitoring, QAing, verifying, and modifying the goals to make sure that we have a rock solid conversion rate in a month before our next webinar so that we can do actual analysis. So the big takeaway here is you will likely run into a situation like this if you're configuring a Google Analytics free account to complement your DApp analysis, and that's okay. This is the name of the game with managing a free Google Analytics account. The important thing is that you're calculating the conversion rates in DApp. You're also using DApp as a baseline to help you test your free Google Analytics account goals. So that's the moral of the story. By using DApp, we were able to identify that, oh, that 10.04% conversion rate, that's a little too high. It should be closer to 2%. So we're going to go back in, tweak the goal, test it, verify over the next couple of weeks to get a more realistic goal so that we're reporting on more of an apples to apples reporting framework. Okay, that was a lot. We have 10 minutes. Would love to hear any questions that anybody has. Again, acknowledging that we did a lot of jumping around today. There's a lot going on here in terms of how you use DApp to calculate your conversion rates for your goals and how you use your free account where you can configure goals to encapsulate your conversion rates and your goals and then actually view those goals in reporting. So I'm happy to take any questions. Tim, do we have any questions that have come in?
Yeah, we do. I've been furiously typing over in the chat box as well. But I just wanted to start off by saying that was a fantastic presentation, Freddie. I can't believe you got through all that stuff and still with time to spare for questions. So bravo to you. I just wanted to also reiterate, as Freddie mentioned, that the goal today was not to be able to have everybody fly around Google Analytics like Freddie just did. We do have a lot of previous webinars that you could use to be able to learn how to become that proficient. But in the time space we had today, we had to really just focus on what it looks like and what could be done. That said, one of the questions that came up that I offered a suggestion, but I'm also interested in maybe hearing your opinion on it. Someone asked that, there was a discussion going on in the chat sort of about how trying to track engagement provides more rich data than something as straightforward as like page views or the metrics that we often see coming out of the box. And so somebody said, well, in the sense that we have mostly just a content site and we don't have things like event registrations or mail to clicks or things like that, what kinds of things do you recommend that those sites could look at to focus on for their KPIs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the examples in here was the average session duration goal. If you can create a baseline for the last year for what your average session duration is, and you have a content site, you can build that goal, and then you can measure how effective your content is at driving additional incremental engagement. So that's one thing that I would recommend for folks with any type of content sites. If you're pumping out new content, new blog posts, white papers, things like that, you can tie this back. You can orient it back to one specific success metric, which is increasing your average session duration. That's a very powerful goal. Now, I would say for content sites, more than likely you have PDFs. So you could actually create a PDF download conversion rate. You could orient your goals towards that type of engagement point. So those are two big ones that I would recommend. Tim, did you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, certainly, I think that we live in an era of websites where even if you're strictly a content site, I don't believe anyone's got a content site at this point that doesn't have outbound links. Because even blog sites, DigitalGov, a portion of DigitalGov is a blog section. And I know whenever I'm writing a blog, I'm always linking out to other things. I mean, you don't even, for example, newspapers and things like the Washington Post has outbound links linking so that you can take a look at other aspects of things that they're talking about in the article. So I certainly feel like as an engagement type metric, you could look at things like outbound link clicks. You could even probably get really creative with it. And instead of just looking at what the outbound links are, you could actually probably do something like numbering them and figuring out how far down the page somebody is clicking on an outbound link. The other thing that I suggested was that, I mentioned in the chat today that tag managers may not be something that everyone is using who's on the call. But I would say tag managers seem like they are going to be ubiquitous in the future, and they certainly help the creation of events become much, much easier, and you don't have to be able to write code to do them once you go through the learning curve. But in Google Tag Manager specifically, they now have an event trigger that comes out of the box for page scroll. And so you could send events to your free Google Analytics account that would track how far down the page someone has scrolled, which again, can you be positive they read that content? No. But does it help you get an idea of what people saw? Yes. And what's nice about the page scroll events is you can configure them in varying different, what's the word I'm looking for? Segments, right? So you could have it by thirds of a page or quarters of a page, or you could, if you wanted to send a whole lot of events to your account, you could even do it, by tenths of a page. So every 10%, it would fire an event that said, oh, someone, this person got that far down the page scroll. So that was definitely one thing. Another question that I see here, this from Darren. He says, a bit of a tangent, but any tips for dealing with sample data and goals? It seems that certain dimensions or metrics and events are more prone to triggering sampling than others. Well, that's a real good question. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Freddie.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I have not seen different custom dimensions sample harder or less than others. So I'd be curious if the person who asked that question could contact us at DApp@support.digital.gov with some examples. But in DApp, you can always export to an unsampled report. It's good. So that's one of the features of Google Analytics 360 is that you're always able to unsample the data by exporting to a report. and then make your manual calculations for your conversion rates that way. Now, if you get sampled in a free account, that's going to be a little bit more tricky, right? You're going to have to figure out, am I using a segment which is session-based and potentially could result in you being sampled harder than if you were using a filter, which is hit-based, right? So there are things like that. There are always going to be caveats in Google Analytics depending on whether you're using DApp or the free account. But DApp has the functionality where you can export an unsampled report. So we highly encourage folks to leverage that.
Yeah, I would add that I have certainly seen that events seem to strain the Google Analytics system more. When I'm doing reporting that gets granular on events, I do notice a much, much higher sampling rate. I think what Freddie mentioned is great there. As I noted in the chat in the beginning, we really feel like the DApp implementation of Google Analytics has a lot of concrete benefits. Obviously, it has benefits for folks who want to aggregate and get data for either an entire agency or across the government. But also, as Freddie mentioned, because it's the paid version, you can get the unsampled reporting. Also, obviously, we talked about the things that come pre-configured out of the box, the events that we do for you, the fact that we're maintaining the filters and so on. But we certainly recognize that there are also those limitations, which is why Freddie took the time to explain to you how to do everything in the free account. And one of those big benefits of having an independent, it doesn't have to be free, you could pay for it too, but having an independent analytics tool in addition to DApp is that you can configure those goals. And the goals, you know, that not only in the goals section will they give you a conversion rate, but if you look back at our previous goals webinar, we showed you how in, for example, the acquisition traffic reports, it actually shows you, oh, from your traffic that came from organic search engines, this is your conversion rate. From your traffic that came to you from Twitter, this is your conversion rate, and so on and so on. So that's really helpful. But in the case that you were trying to do a goal in an independent account and you get sampled really hard, I think Freddie's advice is probably what I would agree with. You could go to the DApp account, get unsampled reports, and do the conversion manually instead. One other question that we had in the last 2 minutes here was if we had any tips for how to get around folks that who have opted out of being tracked or account for dark web traffic. I mean, I kind of gave a response to that. I'm interested to hear what you think, Freddie.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if they've opted out of being tracked, it's going to be, they're not going to appear in the data. So if they're blocking cookies, it's going to be very difficult to understand, you know, what percentage share of traffic are we missing out on. So, you know, that, I guess from my perspective, you know, that traffic's going to be missing from the data. Is that kind of where you're going, Tim?
Yeah, the only thing I said is, you know, you could, if you have access to it, you could draw server logs and you could look at what you have in your Google Analytics account in terms of like total page views or sessions and maybe compare it to the total amounts of times those pages were served in the server logs. That sounds like it might be a bit of an undertaking. I'm not personally, I'm not skilled at nor a fan of trying to dig through server logs, but that's the only thing I could come up with.
Fair point.
All right, we're almost at time, so I'll let you wrap it up, Freddie.
All right, great. Well, thank you everyone for attending today's session. We really appreciate it. Please fill out the survey. We really appreciate your feedback. We want to make sure that these webinars are useful for you. Please contact us at dapp@support.digitalgov.gov with any questions. And then also our part 3 webinar will be happening on September 24th at 3 p.m. Eastern.
Freddie, that's today.
Oh, yes, it is today. Yes.
It'll be happening in October sometime.
Exactly. We need to switch that out, but it will be happening in a month. And so over the next 4 weeks, we'll be doing analysis, tweaking the goals to highlight those insights that will then help the digital.gov team make decisions. So we're really excited to jump into that with you for the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.